Welcome back, everybody. We are going to start our quarter one test review, and we are going to work on the chapter 1 section today. Chapter 1 was all about solving equations, solving literal equations, and sometimes having some special answers, and always using opposite operations. Starting with number 1, we have z plus 3 is equal to negative 6. The opposite of adding 3 is subtracting 3. So we have z. Those add to 0. Negative 6 minus 3 more is negative 9. Number 2, we have 2.6 is equal to negative 0.2 t. Now remember, whenever things are right next to each other like this, that's a multiplication. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 2 is to divide both sides by negative 0.2. And I plop that into my calculator and I get negative 13 is equal to t. Number 3, we have negative n over 5 is equal to negative 2. So remember, that's really not a fraction, it's division. That's negative n divided by 5. The opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5, but I also need to get rid of the negative with the n. So I'm actually going to multiply by negative 5 on both sides. A negative times a negative over here is a positive n, and those 5's reduce to 1's. So we have positive n, and then negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Number 4. We need to start, because remember we're doing SADMAP when we're solving backwards order of operations. So we start with subtraction or addition, and I do have addition here. So the opposite of adding 11 is subtracting 11 to both sides. We have 3y. These add to 0, and negative 16 minus 11 more is negative 27. This is 3 times y. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1y, and negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9. For number 5, we start with moving this 1. Now remember, we can't look at the fact that it's minus b. We have to look at what is this 1. This 1 is positive. So the opposite is a negative 1 or subtracting 1. 6 minus 1 is 5. 1 minus 1 is 0. But don't forget, we still have that negative with the b. Now remember, that negative there is actually a negative 1 times b. So the opposite of multiplying b by negative 1 is to divide b by negative 1. 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive b. So we have negative 5 is equal to b. Number 6, we have n plus 5n plus 7 is equal to 43. Remember, this is my imaginary wall there, and these are like terms. I'm not jumping over this equal sign or imaginary wall to put them together, so we do the operations it's asking us to do. Also, don't forget there's an invisible 1 in front of that n. So if I have 1n plus 5 more n's, we have a total of 6 n's. Now we can go and say, all right, still looking at SADMAP. I have adding 7, the opposite of subtracting 7. Bring down that 6n. Those add to 0. 43 minus 7 is 36. The opposite of multiplying n by 6 is dividing by 6 on both sides. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. Remember, we don't have to write it, but you can if you want to. And 36 divided by 6 is 6. So our solution is n is equal to 6. Number 7, we have negative 4, 2z plus 6. Before we can do SADMAP, we have to make sure that we don't have any parentheses. And we do that by distributing. So I'm going to start with distributing that negative 4. Negative 4 times positive 2z is negative 8z. Negative 4 times positive 6 is negative 24. We bring down that minus 12 and the equals 4. Negative 24 and minus 12 are like terms. So I'm going to bring down that 8z. And if it helps, I can make that add the opposite. So negative 24 plus negative 12 is negative 36. Now that we've gotten it down to most of the like terms are taken care of, we can worry about our SADMAP again. So I am subtracting 36. The opposite is to add 36 to both sides. Bring down that negative 8z. Negative 36 plus 36 is 0, and 4 plus 36 is 40. The opposite of multiplying z by negative 8 is dividing by negative 8. Z is equal to negative 8 over negative 8 is positive 1, and 40 divided by negative 8 is negative 5. Number 8. Again, I want to start with distributing. So I'm going to distribute that 3 halves. 3 halves times x is 3 halves x. 3 halves times 2, this 2 here. Remember, we can make anything a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 2 times 1 is 2. Negative 6 over 2 simplifies to negative 3. Bring down the 5. We have 19. Our like terms are negative 3 minus 5 more, which gives us negative 8. And now we can go back to our SADMAP. We're subtracting 8. The opposite is to add 8. These add to 0, and 19 plus 8 is 27. So 3 halves. If we don't like 3 halves, we can say that's actually 3 divided by 2 and do this in 2 steps. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2 on both sides. These simplify to 1 and leave us with 3x. And then 27 times 2 is 54. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1x, and 54 divided by 3 is 18. So we get x is equal to 18. Number 12 is our next one. We have 3n minus 3 and 4n plus 1. Another of the rules that we talked about way back in chapter 1, that we always combine like terms by adding or subtracting. Remember, like terms are things that have the same letters. So I want to combine the 3n and the 4n. It does not matter if we move the 3n or if we move the 4n. I'm going to move the 3n. That's a positive 3n, so the opposite is to subtract 3n. 3n minus 3n is 0. Please, please, please don't forget that negative in front of the 3. And then 4 minus 3 is 1n. Remember, you can drop the 1 with it or not. And then we have plus 1 at the end. Now we're back to our PEMDAS backwards, or SADMET. The opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. Negative 3 minus 1 more, or plus negative 1, is negative 4. And those add to 0. So n is equal to negative 4. Number 13. Want to start with distributing to get rid of these parentheses. 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times x is 5x. Now, something special that I notice about this is if I took this left side and wrote it as 5x plus 5, because these are both positive, so I can switch them around if I want. These are exactly the same. All right, let's say I don't really notice that. That's okay. So let's move our like terms together. The opposite of a positive 5x is a negative 5x. Now remember, 5 minus 5 is 0. We can't write x there because that means 5 minus 5 is 1. 5 minus 5 is 0. So that adds to 0, and I have 5 equals, this adds to 0, and I have 5. All right, is that true or false? Well, that's true. And if something is true, it's infinitely many solutions. So this is one of our special solutions. Purple. Number 14. We have 3 times n plus 4, 1/2, 6n plus 4. Distribute to get rid of the parentheses. 3 times n is 3n. 3 times 4 is 12. Distribute the 1/2. Remember, multiplying by half is the same as saying I want to take half of whatever that number is. So half of 6 is 3, and we still have that n there, plus half of 4 is 2. So we again want to move our like terms together. The opposite of a positive 3n is a negative 3n, so we're subtracting 3n from both sides. All right, let's not forget, 3 minus 3 is 0. I cannot write n down. Bring down that 12. 3 minus 3 is 0. Bring down that 2. Does 12 equal 2? No, it does not. That is a false statement. And since it is false, that means this has no solution. Let's take a look at number 19. We have 2x minus 4y is equal to 20. And it's asking us to solve for y, get y alone. So I'm cementing that down there and not moving that at all. We had 2 steps that we talked about to get y alone that works. It's add or subtract the x to the other side and then divide by 4, especially if we have something like this that is a linear function type of an equation. So the opposite of a positive 2x is a negative 2x. 2x minus 2x is 0. Remember, it's 0. We cannot write down x. Don't forget to bring the negative with the 4. And then 20 minus 2x. Those are not like terms because the 20 does not have an x and the 2 does. So we just make them sit next to each other. Our last step, this is negative 4 times y. The opposite of multiplying by negative 4 is dividing by negative 4. Don't forget, every single part gets to be divided by 4. Negative 4 over negative 4 is positive 1 with the y. We don't have to write it, but you can if you want to. 20 divided by negative 4 is negative 5. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 2 over 4 simplifies to 1/2 and x. And so this is solving to get y alone. Number 20. They're still asking us to solve for y, so I'm going to cement that down. That means that we need to move the 5 and the 4 over here on the right side. I'm going to start with the 5. The opposite of a positive 5 is a negative 5, and it has a like term with 3. Bring down your 8x. Negative 3 minus 5 more, or plus negative 5, is negative 8. Those add to 0, and we have the 4y still there. This is 4 times y. The opposite of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4. And remember, everything gets divided by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2 with the x. 8 divided by 4 is the 2. And then 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we have 1y or just y, whichever you're more comfortable with. And y is alone. 21, we're going to go ahead and cross out. We're not going to worry about that type of a problem. So let's head to 22. For 22, the first thing they're asking us to do in letter A is solve to get h alone. So I'm again going to go ahead and cement down that h. That h does not move. I have 1 divided by 3 here. I'm going to start with that. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is to multiply by 3. Remember, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 3 times v is 3v. These 3's reduce to 1's, leaving us with bh. Remember, this b here is actually times h. The opposite of multiplying h by b is dividing by b. These b's reduce to 1's, so I'm left with h and 3v divided by b over on the left side. So h is alone. Remember, when we're dealing with these literal equations, we aren't actually solving for anything. We're just taking an equation and trying to change it into something new. Now, in part B, it does ask us to use the equation that we made. And so we have 3 times volume, they're telling us, is 216. And then the area of the base is 36. And this is going to equal the height. So in our calculators, we're doing 3 times 216 divided by 36, and we get 18 for our height. All right, 23. This is a pretty long equation in 23. Basically, what part A is asking us to do is we have an equation that tells us how to get Fahrenheit if we know the temperature in Kelvin. They want us to change this to equal Kelvin. So we're trying to get that alone. Wow. All right. Well, I'm still looking at PEMDAS backwards. And we start with subtraction or addition. Now remember, this stuff in here is trapped by parentheses, which is the very last thing that we look at. I don't want to distribute here because I'm trying to get k alone. And if I distribute, then I'm just adding 2k rather than taking things away. So subtracting or adding? Well, we're adding 32. The opposite of adding 32 is subtracting 32. I can't actually subtract 32 from F, so we just have them sitting next to each other. Writing all this stuff back down, and this end part added to 0. All right. This is 9 divided by 5. The opposite of dividing by 5 is to multiply by 5. Now notice over here on the left side that I put parentheses there. And I put parentheses there because F minus 32 was already there, and we'd have to do that before we could multiply something by that 5 because it was there first. These 5s reduce to 1s. So I'm going to leave that 5 out there and not distribute it. Now I need to move the 9. That's 9 times all of this stuff. The opposite of multiplying by 9 is dividing by 9. These 9s reduce to 1s. That frees that k minus 273.15. And I'm going to leave this as 5 over 9 times F minus 32. So our last step to get k alone is now to move that 273.15. The opposite of subtracting it is to add it. Now be careful here because, all right, this adds to 0. I can't add this 273 to the negative 32. That negative 32 is trapped inside parentheses. So we're just going to have it sit on the outside. So we have 5/9 times F minus 32 plus 273.15 is equal to K. And now K is alone. Part B says, okay, now we know that the temperature is 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Find the temperature in Kelvin. So I'm plugging 180 in for our F. And then I'm going to do this math. We do the 180 minus 32, multiply it by 5, divide it by 9, add the 273.15, and we end up with a Kelvin temperature of 355.37. Now, it does say that you need to round it to the nearest hundredths place, which is here. That's why I rounded it to 7. All right, on the bottom, we have problem number 1 again. Just some more practice on solving these. So the opposite of subtracting 7 is adding 7. These add to 0, and 15 plus 7 is 22. For number 2, oops, that's plus 5, sorry. All right, the opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. So we have 2 divided by 3 times x. This adds to 0 is negative 2. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3 on both sides. These reduce to 1, so I'm left with 2x Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. The opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. 2 over 2 reduces to 1, so we have 1x. And negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Number 3. Let's see, I'm going to start with moving our x values together. The opposite of a positive x is a negative x, so I'm subtracting x. Remember, there's a 1 here. So 11 minus 1 is 10x. We add to 0 over there. The opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So we have 10x. That adds to 0. Negative 1 minus 1, or plus negative 1, is negative 2. And then our last step, the opposite of multiplying by 10 is dividing by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. Negative 2 over 10, I can't divide evenly, but I can reduce that by 2 to make it negative 1/5. All righty, number 6. Wow, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to start with some like terms stuff here. We've got like terms over here, so we have 5x. Negative 2 plus negative 7 is negative 9. On the right side, I have 3x plus 2x is 5x. And then we have the minus 9. Oh, well, look at, they're the exact same equation. So since they are the exact same equation, we have infinitely many solutions. And then for that last one, number 9, oops, I think this should be a minus. I'm going to distribute to start with to get rid of all of those parentheses. So this is the same as saying 6 divided by 3, because this is dividing by 3 here. 6 divided by 3 is 2x. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 7 is positive 14. If I work on like terms here, I have 2x minus 2x. Well, that's 0. 4 plus 14 is 18. So what I'm left with is 18 equals 19. That is definitely not true. And so that means this has no solution. That's it for our Chapter 1 quarter review. Stay tuned for Chapter 2. Have a great night.